Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to our event organized by Historians Without Borders in Finland on Finnish-Namibian historical relations, intertwined histories, and the question is the colonial dimension in that history. And before moving on to our fascinating speakers, both from Finland and Namibia, my name is Teivo Teivainen, and I'm professor of world politics here at the University of Helsinki. And Heta Hedman is Secretary General of Historians Without Borders. So Heta, maybe you can tell the people here something about our organization.
Yes, you can hear me right. Great. Yes, as Teivo said, my name is Heta Hedman, and I work as Secretary General for Historians Without Borders in Finland. Unfortunately, our chairman Erkki Tuomioja couldn't make it tonight. He's having a flu, but he sends his warm greetings, and if I understood correctly, he is following the stream, so he will be taking part online. And I want to welcome everyone on behalf of Historians Without Borders, and especially Your Excellency, the Ambassador of Namibia, to this event. It's very wonderful that you're able to join us tonight. And I hope this will bring some new light to understanding Finnish and Namibian relations from a more historical perspective. This event is organized by Historians Without Borders. We are an NGO working here in Finland, but we also have an international network of historians and other people who are interested in history politics. If you're interested in supporting our work, you can join us as a member. We have some files there in paper that you can fill out after this event. If you have any questions about our membership, I'm very happy to ask them. You can also sign our declaration that you will also find in paper there, and you can also find it online to bring more emphasis to our message globally. Our working group on colonialism specifically organizes this event, and we've held many events such as this before, talking about colonialism both globally and, for example, about the Finnish relationship to colonialism, development aid and other topics such as this, and I hope that we will have more events like this also in the future, because I personally think there's a lot still to dig deep into in this topic. But I think I will not take any more of your time, so warmly welcome on behalf of Historians Without Borders, and I think I will let Teivo take the wheel, and then our other speakers after that. Welcome.
Wonderful. And so the idea, we will have 3 introductory speeches here, and then we will open the floor for some discussion, conversation here. So I would like to welcome here, we have who will be our first speaker, Professor Leila Koivunen from University of Turku. She's professor of global history and intercultural encounters. And please, Leila, and I'll also invite our Namibian guests here, Loini Isenda, and she's doctoral student at the fashion and textile industry and Fashion and Textile Industries lecturer at the University of Namibian. And please welcome and Dr. Meamino Shiweda, also from University of Namibia, and lecturer at the Department of Intermediate and Vocational Education in the School of Education at the University of Namibia. Please, Meamino. Okay, so Leila, you will give us some reflections on Finnish-Namibian history in a new light.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes, I'm planning to do that. Can you hear me? Yes. Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. It's a great pleasure to be here. Okay. great pleasure to be here today. And it's very nice to tell about our current research and our future plans. And my name is Leila Koivunen, as Teivo just introduced, and my colleague Raita Merivirta, she was also supposed to be here, but unfortunately she was unable to attend today. She also got flu. But before giving the floor to Loini and Meameno, I would now briefly like to outline the historical intertwinements between Finland and Namibia and tell about the new collaboration between Namibian and Finnish scholars that has strengthened during the last years and that seeks to look at the relation from novel angles. Okay. At first glance, Finland and Namibia seem to be two countries that do not have so much in common. They are geographically distant, one in the southern hemisphere and the other one in northern Europe. They are inhabited by people who are ethnically and culturally distant from each other. Yet a closer look reveals a partly intertwined history. And the connection between these two present-day independent countries dates back to year 1869, when the first workers of the Finnish Missionary Society arrived in the Ovambo region, which you can see there on the map, which later became the north-central part of Namibia. The society had been established 10 years before, when Finland was still part of the Russian Empire, and this establishment can be seen as one of the manifestations of the desire of the Finns to contribute to the building of the transnational Christian empire and become a civilizing European nation of its own right. At first, the Finnish missionaries were the only larger and more permanently residing group of Europeans in the area that became German Southwest Africa in 1884. After Germany's defeat in the First World War, this area was moved under the South African rule up to the independence of Namibia in 1990. During these decades, it has been estimated that approximately 500 Finnish missionaries lived in the region for different periods of time. Even under the German regime, the grip of the colonial administration in this provincial region was weak, so that the Finns were more or less the only Europeans in the area. Missionaries were dependent on the benevolence of local kings to settle down in their lands, build mission stations and churches, and start approaching local people with new religious ideas. Over the course of decades, their presence became increasingly visible, and they succeeded in convincing a growing number of Ovambo people of the need for change. In addition to evangelical Lutheran faith, Finns played a central role in creating literary languages and introducing Western modes of education, medicine, and social practices. The work in Ovambo set in motion complex epistemological processes that would subsequently influence the formation of both Finnish and Ovambo conceptions of the world and of each other. The Finnish presence in the region resulted in activities and long-lasting effects, many of which were similar to those that were typical in a colonial relation. At the same time as the Finnish missionaries brought many changes to the lives of the Ovambo people, awareness of Ovambo and Africa amongst the Finnish people increased rapidly as the missionary society produced various materials to be circulated in Finland. The Finnish Missionary Society distributed information about Ovambo and the progress of their missionary work to the supporters of the cause through various materials, including mission journals, novels, educational materials, photographs, maps, and African objects displayed in mission exhibitions. By seeing, reading, consuming these materials, the Ovambo region became an especially meaningful and even a seemingly familiar place for Finns. For a long time, Ovambo remained the best-known corner of Africa among the Finns. And as we know, later on in the 1950s onwards, Finns played a role in the developments that led to the independence of Namibia in 1990. Some missionaries were actively involved in supporting liberation movement SWAPO and its freedom fighters, many of whom were members of their congregations. And the Finnish Martti Ahtisaari, who later became the president of Finland in 1994, was also actively involved as the UN Special Representative heading the UN Transition Assistance Group. Thus, the liberation struggle of Namibia was actively followed in Finland, and these events further affected on how Namibia was perceived in Finland, but also on how Finns were known in Namibia. Now, I would like to move on to describe a little bit the novel collaboration, which started with an agreement of partnership between the University of Turku and University of Namibia in 2018. And it brought together historians from Turku and Windhoek to meet and discuss how to build on previous generations of research in order to approach the historical relation from new and increasingly combined perspectives. Our aim is to develop collaborative working methods in order to write increasingly multivocal histories. We trust that by combining different language skills, different cultural backgrounds, and different knowledge and points of view to the shared fields of inquiry, we can produce something that has not been attempted before. As part of this collaboration, we have already produced a popular fest script entitled Intertwined Histories to celebrate the 150 years of Finnish-Namibian relations. And this was a compiled collection which reported existing research conducted both in Finland and Namibia. It's an open access publication. It's very easily available. You can see the link over there. You can Google and find it. This book was an inspiring new opening, as it made it very clear that interesting research has been conducted and is currently conducted in both countries, and it also showed that new research is needed. And we also have a current anthology project with a working title, Colonial Aspects of Finnish-Namibian Relations, and chapters in this book investigate how colonial worldviews were embedded in Finnish missionary and humanitarian practices in Namibia, and how they affected the emerging relationship with local people. And we are hopeful that it will be published next year. To conclude, I would like to inform you of a brand new website. In fact, it is being launched right here and now. This webpage, it presents the team, our aims, and our publications. And in addition, it also tells about a transcription or translation project that we have had. And I would like to say a couple of words about that. This project has focused on one of the key figures of Finnish mission work in Ovambo, namely Martti Rautanen, who worked there over 5 decades. He kept a regular diary, and his observations open up a very unique view of the early stages of Finnish mission work in the area. His diaries portray the daily life of mission workers, milestones of their work, as well as Rautanen's numerous subjects of interest. Local cultures, traditions, practices, languages, the development of written language, flora and fauna, meteorology, for instance. The usability of this diary material has been affected by the fact that it is written in German, and it is partly very difficult to read. The Turku University Foundation has funded a project whereby these diaries are made more accessible for scholars by transcribing the original German text and by producing a Finnish translation of it. And this work has been executed by M.A. Eero Perunko. This far, the material consists of diary text from years 1870 to 1925, but it does not include all existing materials from these years. But we intend to continue the project in the future and supplement the material also to include the rest of the diary texts. Rautanen's diaries are part of his personal collection, which is located in the National Archives, Finnish National Archives in Helsinki. And using these transcriptions and translations requires permission. But if you are interested in applying, please visit the webpage for further information. It can be found there. Welcome to visit the page, and thank you for the attention. I will now give the floor to Loini.
Wonderful, thank you. Thank you, Leila, and also for inaugurating the wonderful Finnam website here. Go and check it out. So now Loini Isenda will talk about embracing the Awambo pre-colonial attire and on the impact of the Finnish missionaries on its transformation with emphasis on Uputu artifacts. Did I pronounce that correctly? Okay, welcome. So wonderful.
All right. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. As I was introduced before, my name is Loini Zenda. I'm a fashion and textile lecturer and also a PhD student at the University of Namibia. I'm here as an exchange student at the University of Turku under the supervision of Professor Leila. So what I want to discuss today is concerning the transition of the traditional dress of the Awambo people. Today, I'm wearing one of the dresses that the Finnish missionaries introduced to the Awambo people about 150 years ago. And when we compare this dress to what was worn 150 years ago, through my research, I found out that it is missing the communicative aspect. Yeah? Pre-colonial dress, and I'm referring to the dresses that were worn before missionary encounters, were very communicative. All right? Communicative in the sense that it reflected the identity of the wearer. By looking at what a person is wearing, you can tell their gender, you can tell the clan which they belong to, you can tell their status, whether they're wealthy or they belong to a royal family. You could tell which stage they are going through in their lives. For example, you could tell whether the young girl is now going to be initiated into her womanhood. You could tell whether the woman or the man, okay, the woman is pregnant or she just gave birth or she's mourning. And that also included the hairstyle as well. So during pre-colonial times, every ornament that the wearer wore was communicating something about their lifestyle. Just to talk a bit about the Awambo people, a background, they are found in the northern part of Namibia. There are about 8 groups, and All these groups have their own way of expressing themselves. Wambo people are also skilled with craft skills such as basket making, pottery, blacksmith, yes, they were mining as well, woodwork, and with all those skills, that is what they were using to produce the different elements of the attire. Now, my focus for my study, I am looking specifically at the metal beads. The metal beads, where I have taken time to interview blacksmiths and different beading artisans to find out what do these beads mean. Because right now we are just wearing them, but we don't actually know the different meaning. What did they mean for the social, cultural events among the Awambo people? And some of the narratives that they have that they have told us is, for example, when a baby is born, for some clan, they were identified by adding these specific metal beads. I also just forgot to inform you that the metal beads among the Wambo people, they were made from copper or iron. The iron was mined in the southern Angolan side, and then the copper was mined around the Tsumeb area. And so through trading, the different Awambo groups were now sharing the different beads so that they could include them in their social cultural events. So I've spoken about when a baby is born, for them to be introduced into the father's family, they will make use of the beads, for example, to identify that you belong to this clan. Another usage of the beads for babies is for protection. If a mother wanted to go out and attend a specific event, she will also have to wrap these beads around the baby's wrist and ankles as to protect the baby against any evil intention. Another usage for the beads for babies as well is, for example, if the baby is struggling to walk, they believe that by wrapping the legs of the baby with a lot of the beads will strengthen the bone. So there was also a healing aspect to the beads when it came to using them on a baby. Then as a person develops, as the wearer develops, for example, when you start entering into your adulthood, for women, they would have to go through an initiation ceremony called Olufuko. And during this initiation ceremony is where now the girls would be adorned with a lot of the beads as a sign that now they have entered into their womanhood. Another usage as well for the beads is, for example, if a man wanted to propose to a woman to show that they are interested and they wanted a response, they would send these beads as a gift to the woman, and depending on whether she accepts the beads or not, that was now how the relationship was initiated. Another important cultural usage of the bead example was it was being used as for trading, where the different groups were using the beads as a form of currency to barter with each other to get livestock or different household products such as arrows or whatever they needed. And then 1870s is when the Finnish missionaries they entered the region of Wamboland, and they had their own ideology of how a Christian should be. So when they arrived, these were some of the examples of attires that they viewed. And according to the Christian belief, the people were not well dressed. And this is where they started inventing different strategies to teach people how to dress the Christian way. And some of the strategies is, for example, by creating sewing groups. So when you become a Christian, you could participate in a sewing group where they will teach you to sew so that you could make yourself clothing which looked more appropriate. Apart from the sewing group, they also imported clothes from Finland, which were donated to help the unchristian Awambo people to look more Christian. So those were some of the strategies. Another strategy as well that the Finnish missionaries implemented to change the dress is, for example, by implementing the cotton plantation, which they explored with in the 1890s, but unfortunately, due to our harsh weather, it did not grow sustainably. Yeah. Yes, and something else that you can also see from the images, the hairstyle. These women are now shaven. They are not having any cultural hairstyle. So, and that is one of the ways they were told to express themselves with their new conversion. So in the pre-colonial costume, you had to wear a specific hairstyle to communicate who you are, your identity. But when you became a Christian, you had to cut it off so that you can look more appropriate. And another implementation as well is wearing scarves. So from the different cultural hairstyles, Awambo people were expected to wear scarves, for example. So this study is very important in relation to our relationship, the Finnish and Namibian relationship. As a creative person, we are now embracing, we are now exploring the whole concept of identity, which we feel is now lost because of the adaptation of some of the dresses, some of the materials that were introduced. I am showing a picture of what some of the women are now exploring when we have cultural event, which also includes a cloth. It's called Odelela, which we say it's the Awambo cloth. But as you look at it, it's not speaking about the story. It does not communicate who the wearer is. So therefore, it's very important that, also for me as a fashion and textile lecturer, that I work with material that has to do with cultural preservation to also encourage cloths, textile prints that are more communicative to tell our African story. Thank you.
Oh, wow, thank you, Loini. Fascinating stuff. You'll get the chance to ask questions and comment soon, but let's first hear the talk by Meameno Shiweda on pioneers of teacher training education in northern Namibia, where it all began.
Good afternoon, evening, everyone. Thank you for being here. As you have heard, I'm Meameno Shiweda. I'm a teacher educator at Vike Punyepohamba campus of the University of Namibia in Ongwediva. And as you can see from my title, one can determine as to what discipline I'm coming from. And when I saw the call to collaborate on this Finnish-Namibian United Nations encounters, I actually thought, what kind of angle? Yeah. Okay. What kind of angle or dimension do I, bring to this? Being a teacher educator, so I thought, let me look at it from, what the role that the Finnish missionaries played in teacher training education, especially in northern Namibia. As you can see there from this picture, That's quite a big gathering that is made up of the Finnish missionaries when they actually came to Namibia in 1870. From that year onwards, they gave classes, or they taught the locals. They gave them basic literacy so that they could find a way of, spreading the gospel, because initially that is what they intended on doing when they actually taught the locals how to read and write. That is also another gathering where you can see that, a Finnish missionary who's a male is, teaching the learners, quite a diverse group. So you can see some seem older and some quite young. So that is actually what happened, okay, at the beginning, as they started teaching the locals. Because then they, like I mentioned earlier, they wanted to get them to know how to read so that they could actually read the Bible by themselves. Now, when I got the idea as to what kind of perspective that I would bring to this project, I thought, let me have a short survey on what I could find with regard to the Finnish missionaries' role in northern Namibia. And I came across the book by Lahia Lehtonen, Schools in Namibia, of Schools in Ovamboland, from 1870 to 1970. And I also looked at the work that was done by Ayla Helander. Okay, so that proved to be my inspiration as to what to write about, because then she said she wrote about women teaching women, impact of gender and religion on training teachers in colonial Africa. Okay, being a woman and seeing as to what I encounter in my classes, most of the teacher trainees that we have are actually female. Okay, and I kind of thought there must have been a reason as to why Ayla looked at women teaching women. And I came across the fact that, most of the Finnish missionaries that came to Namibia or to northern Namibia to teach were actually single women. Okay, and then most of them, eventually, as they started teaching, they also got to teach only women. And then these are the women that I've focused on then to say, okay, there are actually 3 women that worked or that joined the male-dominated career, because most of the earlier teachers were men. So I looked at 3 women that pioneered the teacher education or teacher training education. So these are Johanna Christoph, who was the first female teacher to be trained in northern Namibia. The second was Emilia Ninda, and then Rauna Haifene. Okay, so these are the ladies that helped to pioneer teacher education in northern Namibia from the time that they got their training. Briefly, my work is looking at what kind of biological information I could find about them, as well as their educational background, and then the role that they played in educating other women. Like I said, I got that idea from Ayla Helander, who wrote about women educating women. Okay, so these women actually paved the way for other women to become career women, because it was unlike that, that women could become career women, because then their role was to remain home carers, or, to give birth to kids and then look after them, or to look after their husband and stuff like that. But actually, Johanna Christoph was the first, first female trained, or first trained female teacher who also then paved the way for others to follow in her footsteps. So then I'll quickly go through their biological information and as well as their educational background to just, let you know as to what kind of role that they played. And that's why I said, where did it all come from, okay? Where it all started from, okay? So then Johanna was born in December in 1901 in Ondangwa, where she also did her her schooling, and then later got trained as a teacher at Onipa in 1925, okay? So she has served at several schools, where she then also served with other female teachers as they joined the teaching career. She remained in service for 25 years, and she passed on in 1953. But one thing that I would like to bring to your attention is that Johanna, when she trained as a teacher, she vowed not to get married. She vowed to remain single, like her teachers that trained her. Okay. In fact, the Finnish missionaries didn't want her to get married. Were against the fact that she wanted to become a teacher, because they felt that if you train women, for one, you are wasting resources, because as soon as they are trained, they would want to get married and then leave. Their husbands would be against them working. So she vowed not to get married. So that's how she lived for the rest of her life after training as a teacher. Now, with regard to Emilia Ninda, this lady was born in Angola, in Ompanda, but because part of Namibia is Angola, and some of the Oshkwanyama speakers remain even there now. So she moved into Namibia to get her training or her schooling. When they got in Namibia, they stayed in Ondangwa, and then but then that's not where she got her education. She moved to Angola, where there were schools that were established there. So she also did then her training, her teacher training at Onipa from 1929 to 1931. Okay, because then you can see then that is after Johanna has trained as a teacher. So she's probably the second trained teacher or female teacher. One thing that is different from the three ladies that I'm focusing on is that she at least got further education in South Africa when a group of teachers or teacher trainees were sent to South Africa for further education. Upon coming back, she taught at Ongajera Training School, where she trained other teachers. Okay, she worked as a teacher trainer to train other females to become teachers. And then in 1951, she was tasked to start a school at Ondobe, where she taught until 1982. She worked for 55 years, and she retired in 1982. With regard to Rauna Haifene, is that one thing that is also different from her with regard to the other ladies is that for her, she at least got married. Okay, unlike the two ladies that I have mentioned earlier, for her, she got married to a male teacher, Gabriel Tapopi. But there is not really much that is known with regard to her educational background or, where she was born and all that. Now, there is, with regard to women becoming teachers, is that, there are actually a few things that have happened with them in the sense that they becoming a career woman in northern Namibia at that time challenged the traditional structure and, the role of the woman in the sense that, they were not expected to have careers. Like I mentioned earlier, they needed to stay at home and look after their families and all that. But as they became teachers, they became salary earners. They earned salaries. They became financially independent. that, but they were looked on, they were frowned upon, because then why wouldn't you want to have a husband? But then they proved others wrong to say, I mean, I can be happy, I'm normal, but I can also be single, so that happened on a positive side, I think. But then you could also see that then they had to make sure that then they will not, they gave on the idea of getting married. Like there is an account of one that said she had a boyfriend prior to going to training school, but then she had to return everything that was given to her because then she didn't want to come back and then get married upon her completion of her studies. So then the Finnish women were like, the teachers were against women getting married because then they were wasting the resources, or that is spent on training, on the women's training. They will also leave once a woman decides to get married, then that means that they will leave jobs. I mean, unwanted vacancies that would also need to be filled, and then that will mean that you needed to train somebody else to replace the one that has left. So you can see there by the pictures that they no longer needed to work in the fields as much as they could. They could still work in the field, but they could still have their jobs. So that is something that, apart from doing all the normal roles of a woman, they then reserve their work more on teaching other women. Now I encountered a few challenges because the reason why I'm referring to this is because perhaps somebody in there or amongst us here has some information that they could provide me with. So I felt that I don't really have enough information that I wish to have to enrich this information or account that I'm writing. So I feel that there are limited sources that I could actually read that refer to teacher training education, especially in northern Namibia. So and I also felt that as much as I had oral interviews with the elderly people in northern Namibia, I would still wish to have more information so that, like I said, enrich my account of the relationship or the fact that Finnish missionaries pioneered, and then they pioneered teacher education or teacher education training, the field that I am in. It's because it's very dark here now. I cannot see anything. I don't know what happened, but I had prepared some words from my last words. I was going to quote Lahia Lehtonen, who in our did the battery go flat? I think that it's gonna come back on. I think we should give it a minute. So, like I was saying, although I cannot see anymore, but can we switch it on? Perhaps. It's coming. Okay. I'm just giving it some time before it comes back on.
meanwhile, the audience can start thinking about all the difficult questions and comment and enlightening comments that you will soon have the possibility to give us.
Okay, thank you. So right now, where we are right now, as far as teacher training education is concerned, teacher training courses are offered at 5 campuses of the University of Namibia, and then the majority of teacher trainees, especially in my classes, because and I refer to something that I know of, mostly women. Okay, so and I've been observing classes, you know, where teacher trainees are taught at the University of Turku, and I've observed the same trend that they're actually in the class that I've gone to. There were only 3 men as opposed to the rest that were women. So I guess you know, women seem to still be, you know, in charge of teacher training, or teaching our nation. So, but then with regard to, I mentioned here that, you know, courses are more advanced now, and content is, you know, advanced as opposed to the type of, although I did not mention it, I apologize for that, but I needed to say that the courses that were, that teachers, or the content that they got then was basically on, you know, basic arithmetics or geography and stuff, but then, you know, more advanced content is given right now. And then I'm saying that women are no longer restricted to their careers. They can, you know, or to their, simply to their careers, as opposed to like the likes of Joanna Christoph, who was told you cannot get married. If you train you as a teacher, vow to say that you will never get married. But now, I mean, I can be a mother, I can also be a teacher trainer. Okay, so I can have a career of my own. So basically, that is where we are now, and that is, and then I would like to end with Kanyegu's few last words in her book, who said that the Finns arrived in 1870 and saw themselves as preachers in the first place. They certainly did not think that their work would be the beginning of a system of schools and health services. This is, however, what happened. So what actually is saying is that, you know, they laid the foundation on which our current teacher training education is founded on. So that is basically all that I wanted to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Fascinating aspects. Maybe since you were so, you didn't do overtime, actually, we are a little bit ahead of schedule, which is exceptional. Just one question. I don't know how to formulate this. Just to warm up, I'd like to open the floor soon. Like thinking about the impact of the Finnish people there, thinking about what aspects of colonialism we can think about now. There was a strong gender dimension and role of women, and I was thinking, like, when you were talking about the attire, the way women in particular were dressing, and before there was more communication, right? As you said. So I was thinking, to what extent was the communication on that you could see on the dress if somebody's pregnant, etc. To what extent can we see that as a sort of self-expression of the women, and to what extent is it social control over women, and how to think about this, and like a little bit similar kind of thing, like whether in teacher education at that time, whether the idea that a woman who's in a teacher education cannot get married, so is that like remaining single? How to think that also again in terms of women's kind of, I don't know, maybe this is a colonial concept as such, autonomy, sort of self-rule and all that. Was it better that you remained single, or better that you would get married in some sense? In which case was the woman more free at that time? So these were just some thoughts I got when listening to you. I don't know, Leila, did you have questions that you came up with?
Not yet. I'm letting the others ask first.
Shall we open the floor, or you want to reflect?
Okay, I'm not sure whether I got your question very well, but let me just rephrase what I think I heard. Did you say that it did women think that? Seriously.
I tried to think like whether it was, to what extent it was a colonial imposition that, okay, you study with us, you shouldn't get married, and what implications does that have for sort of role of women in the society at that time? What did it make them more oppressed, less oppressed, more free, less free, if they didn't get married as opposed to getting married?
I see. I don't think it was something that was enforced on them, that they, you wouldn't, I think it was from a certain point a personal, decision to decide whether to, get married or not. But because then if you opted to become a teacher, then, because then like for Johanna Christoph, she really, really wanted to become a teacher. So for her, getting married was not an option. So I don't think that it was really such a colonial, coming from a colonial aspect, or, because then the same teachers that were teaching them were also single. So they could see how they lived, and then they were fine with that. I think, I don't know. Okay. I hope I have answered.
Okay. For me, the colonial aspects, the change has to do with changing the social structure of the society, meaning what they were doing for the particular reason. So now for the Finnish missionaries to bring the gospel, which we appreciate, but in terms of who we are and why we do what we do, and also, for example, with the skills, some families, like I mentioned, some families are coming from a family of blacksmiths. That is how they earn their income. Now, when you change the expression, that means you're also affecting the practices, the businesses. So that is one way where people feel that we became less privileged, not privileged, but we were affected. Also in terms of wealth, the ornaments were very much something that was expressing the family wealth. Yeah, now I'll refer it to perhaps also with the woman. Okay, both men as well, but I've researched more on the woman. So for some of the narratives where, for example, we had to throw them away or we had to burn them, but the way those ornaments were acquired, it was, if it was translated into our time, they would be considered extra wealthy. So without that, you are changing again who they are, what they can do with their lives, etc. And that's why we observe it sometimes as a colonial influence as well.
Fascinating. Thank you. Let's see. I'm sure there are several questions and comments there. Heta, maybe you want to, and if you want to introduce yourselves before you make your comment, that would be wonderful. If you want to remain anonymous, that's also permitted. So please, Mr. Ambassador.
Yes, good afternoon. My name is Charles Joseph, Namibian ambassador to Finland. I want to thank Historians Without Borders for really organizing this event. I'm sure a lot of Finns are aware of this relationship. And I just want to as an introduction, tell you, I was talking to one of my colleagues a few days ago, and he made reference to this particular talk. And he said, interestingly, I did not know that Finland was in such a relationship with Namibia, the colonial thing. And of course, when somebody says that, you immediately think back of what is it that colonialism is all about. It's about taking people's land, killing people, and all those negative things. And of course, these colonial histories, maybe you can put them in, if ever, you can put them in the benign kind of colonialism and the exploitative colonialism, that if you can put them in those two envelopes. Now, what I hear from this engagement is that, yes, the Finnish were there, but they were not really colonialists in the real sense of the word, as we got to know them in the global South. The part about even the clothing, it says, yes, people were no longer naked. Of course, we still have got the tradition. The Olofugo is still there, and there's still that particular practices. And maybe as part of that specific festivity, you can discern those issues that you have raised about what is it about the girls, maybe the backgrounds and all those. What I could not gather is that the dress that you are wearing specifically, for instance, is it peculiarly Finnish? I looked around and I don't see that kind of fashion in Finland. Maybe it is there, but is that dress particularly Finnish in one way or the other, or if you wear that dress, I would not have. I thought you are from the continent suddenly, not from Finland. So that kind of is the dress in itself. Is it a colonial construct that has been imposed on Namibia, or is it just the fact that you had to put on something, and that being naked and being also with the minimal, that was peculiarly African, or So there are a lot of arguments that can go around that. The education part, of course, education is a good thing. Was it again something that was peculiarly colonial, as far as Namibia is concerned, to have brought education or to have brought health? So maybe then Finland gets put into this benign kind of colonialism, if one can call it that. Personally, we've got the German experience. And if you put the German experience and the Finnish experience next to each other, you'd not say that Finland was a colonial force. And therefore that argument really, or even that experience, is minimal for a lot of Namibians. Maybe the discussion was not meant to go that direction. Really just to look at these two particular phenomena. And my question still remains, was there a bigger colonial objective that the Finnish or even the Russian people had with Namibia? Maybe that's an open-ended question.
You want to comment on that now, or you want to take more questions? Okay, we can take a couple more. Yes, please.
I'm Merlin Oster. I'm actually from the German embassy, and I think I want to add something that His Excellency, the Ambassador of Namibia, said, or adding a question to that, because, of course, no one can argue with the horror of the German past in Namibia, but being now in this kind of post-colonial world, and as you mentioned, the attire is so much influenced by the Finns. Is this, even though the experience is so good, or was so good with the Finns, the missionaries and stuff like that, is it still something some Namibians want to get, or the Namibian society wants to get rid of, because it is from colonial times, or is that something that you just is so much part of your history now and such a positive part as well that you want to kind of like have that next to the pre-colonial attire?
Yes, important questions. Were there other for this round? Or maybe we'll take it now to up here. Who wants to start?
Yes, thank you for the questions. In terms of clothing, when we talk about colonialism, we are referring to changing identity. Maybe it's not something so much that I would say Namibians see it that way, but when you study the whole dynamics of fashion is expressing who you are, what you went through, everything about yourself. So for us in the creative industry, we are talking about we lost a bit of our identity. Right now, if you I can take you to the north, for example. We can attend a wedding where you'll see a lot of the Awambo people wearing this dress. Yes, we say it's our traditional dress, but you can't tell the story, the individual story of the wearer, and that is where the argument is coming from. And that is something that in the pre-colonial dress was very dominant, that how you are dressing, it's about your identity, which also influences also how people relate to you as well, and related to your wealth, etc., etc. So it's all about the whole notion of identity, that yes, we're wearing this dress, but our identity is affected. And even for fashion designers, when it's time for them to showcase some of their garments at the different events, you can't really pick up that this is a Namibian designer. Yes, we're using the cloth, but if you research more on the different symbolism of how it was being used, that element is missing, and that is what we're arguing, that's what we lost with the whole change of becoming a Christian and having to wear dress as what the Finnish missionaries encouraged.
Yes, I would like to say a couple of words about the position of Finland in the colonial world. It's a big topic, and quite much has been written about it in recent years. And it is true that Finland was never a colonizing power, far from that, because Finland was part of the Russian Empire for most of the period when imperialism was in its peak. But still, Finland was part of the world that was full of colonial structures. And many Finnish people traveled abroad and participated in campaigns and projects abroad, which were closely linked to these colonial practices and structures. So even if they were not the worst colonizers, perhaps, they were also involved in many ways, and the idea that Finns were somehow innocent or outsiders, I think it has to be, it's not valid. And many historians have shown that there are several very interesting and important topics to be researched in this field. And the same goes for what happened in Finland, of course. And we, in this team and in our project, we are also very interested in having a closer look what happened in Finland, because all kinds of images also cross the borders, and we also were very much in the middle of all kinds of colonial texts and images, and I would also like to argue that our nationalism was also, part of it was about the discussions of other peoples in all, well, in distant parts of the world, in the colonial world, they were an important element in how our own identity was constructed during that time. So this is a very complex topic, and there is still much to study and examine in detail, but I would say that Finland and the Finnish people were very much involved in these processes, even though Finland itself was not in such position than some other countries in the world.
Honorable Ambassador referred to or made asked to whether one could regard Finnish role in Namibian affairs as benign or, malignant colonialism, if I got you right. From the education perspective, I feel that for women, as my focus is that women got new identities and new status in the society because then they acquired new skills, and they were actually aware of their skills that they could, what they could offer, especially to the sustainability of, or sustainability of the development of the country, because then they were no longer just confined to the kitchen, but they could actually, bring about something that they could, relate to from their perspective as teachers. So I feel that if it wasn't for the Finnish missionaries, then we might still be where we were, that, women were only considered as somebody who needed to take care of the family and not be a career woman. That's my feeling. Thank you.
There is a question here. Yeah.
Thank you for your inspiring speeches regarding this subject. I'm Jerkko Holmi, doctoral student in the discipline of contemporary history from the University of Turku. I'm one of the writers in the upcoming book project Leila mentioned. If I'm not dropped out by the editorial group in the upcoming months. My comment revolves around the presentation of Loini about the garments and the attires in the pictures. The most interesting picture to me was one of these sewing groups that you showed. And I started thinking that currently in Finland there's only one institution where everyone's head is shaved and they all dress in same attire, and that's Finnish Army or Defense Forces, how do you want to say it? And in previous times, similar institutes in Finland have been mainly boarding schools. So it means that all those institutions that have the same connotation of making some kind of discipline to those wild natives in Namibia, maybe. So it speaks to me that maybe the aim of dressing up and shaving the women of northern Namibia wasn't about the more on the religion, but instead of some kind of oppression or intent of showing hierarchy, that if we can make you wear these attires and use this or shave your heads, it shows that we have some kind of an oppression or leadership towards you, and that maybe revolves somewhere around what Leila said about the colonialism aspects of the Finnish intentions or actions in northern Namibia.
Do you want to? Can I also add related to Loini's talk about garments? I think this was excellent. I was also thinking when you were talking like this, how, like, let's say after the Second World War, women seen as collaborators of Nazis. What did they do? They shaved their hair. So it's shaving the hair of a woman, at least in some European contexts, has been very disciplinary or humiliating or disciplinary kind of act. So it was fascinating to see that. Also, when you were talking about the dress and the comments here, I was thinking here, because here, when we've been talking here in the context of colonialism in Finland about the Sami, and it's quite well known, like within the Sami, the indigenous group in people in mainly in northern Finland, Sweden, Norway, and Russia. The dress is very important, and there are also communicative aspects and all that. And then there's been this debate about, and I was curious whether you have that in Namibia, about the dress, sort of something people call cultural appropriation and things like that. Like if I would start using some aspects of traditional Namibian dress, would that be like I'm doing cultural appropriation, and would that be, how would that be seen? Because that's a big topic here in some quarters.
I think for this topic, as much as the Finnish influenced us, we need to go back to who were the people? How did you find them? And I understand they had to change their dressing to support the conversion of their faith, and also and I also read somewhere that it has to do with status. But the argument is why? It's who they were. It's part of the social cultural dynamics. So those are the things that are now missing. Yes, cultural appropriation, yes, but we change our lifestyles to fit into somebody else's culture. Yeah. And when we talk about colonialism, that also involves that when you change how people live, that is also another aspect. So it's not just about taking over the land, also just changing people's lifestyle. So that is the angle where I am pushing for that. Yes, we're wearing this, but you changed our whole social dynamics by changing our dressing, because it's linked to that. It's linked to who we are. It's linked to our lifestyle. And you can say it's part of the status, but that status in the Eurocentric context. What was status in our context? So I ended off by saying, what is our African story? And this is what I feel that the Finnish came and changed. Yeah. So even though we are expressing it, but it should have been stronger. And there are groups that were Christianized later, who we thank God they still maintained it. But there are some groups, for example, the Ondonga, who completely, or not completely, but they've lost a lot of the tradition. And so they have to go back and revise what they were doing and try to adapt it back. Although, yes, we have this just to identify ourselves, but in terms of lifestyle, again, those dynamics are lost. Yeah.
And the shaving?
Shaving, the hairstyle. Okay, you can't, it's part of you. You can't, in fact, having short hair it's seen as something humiliating in the African context. Again, back to the hairstyle. The hairstyle of a girl who is participating in the initiation ceremony is not going to wear the same hairstyle as a married woman. So again, we're saying status, but you've changed those dynamics for us. Yeah. So now it was younger girls having shaven hair and the older woman. There's some studies where it was traumatic for that woman because the hair reflected who she was, how she's addressed, and everything.
But do you know what the motivation, like in the pictures where it seemed like the Namibian women their heads were shaven and perhaps influenced by Finnish missionaries? So what was the justification?
The one image with a few girls sewing, that was part of the sewing school. So it was not something that the community accepted. That was part of being one of the strategies now that they use to be a Christian. So if you decided you wanted to convert to be a Christian, you had to change your looks, which involved also shaving off the hair. So now it was an issue of those who wore the original attire and those who wore what the missionaries thought was the right appearance, civilized.
Excellent. I see.
Yes, there's actually 2 questions here, and there's 1 question in the live stream as well, but maybe we take first the questions that are here present.
Hello, Laura Ketonen from the Finnish-Namibian Society. Thank you for very enlightening speeches today. I have 2 questions. The first one links to the previous question and is for both of the Namibians. How do you see the current day discussion in Namibia relating to school uniforms, and what kind of hairstyles are acceptable for school students today, and linking back to your research and the kind of colonial connections there? And the second question is for Loini about the Avamba dress, because we know that the Herero dress is very well known for its colonial roots, also with young people in Namibia, from my understanding. But how about the young people in Namibia? Do they know about this history with the Avamba dress? Thank you.
The younger people, they are not aware of where the dress came from our class discussion. And so that's why I'm also emphasizing on bringing all these narratives into the curriculum. And then with the issue of hairstyle, I do know that in the north, there are some schools who still follow that rule of having short hair. I'll be honest to say I haven't gone back to look at why they emphasize that, but I do know there is that rule. Maybe the one part that I also forgot is when you enter the church, there is still the rule of what we should wear to church, yeah, which is linked back to what the Finnish missionaries had allowed and what they didn't allow. And that is also why I was interested in looking at this discussion. Like I would see, for example, if we're having a wedding, my mother would go to church wearing maybe this dress, but not so much of the ornaments. And then when we get home, when it's time for us now to have the celebration, that is when the woman all of a sudden changed to wear all those ornaments. So that is where I started looking at why is that happening and how the church changed our whole perception of what we see as tradition and not. Okay?
With regard to hairstyles in schools, I feel that there are conflicting attitudes towards that, because then some, like Loini said, with regard to schools in the north, there are a few actually that promote short hair still, because they tend to feel that when learners have long hair, then they take time, or it's time consuming for them, that they neglect their studies. I suppose that's where the argument is from, or coming from, with regard to short hair. That's what I think I know with regard to short hair right now.
And there was still at least one question from the audience, and you said one from the stream. Do you have that question, Heta, there?
Yes.
Then, okay, good. So please.
Yeah, thank you. My name is Pauliina Shilonka, and also from the Finnish-Namibian Society. Thank you. Very interesting presentations from all 3 of you. But I would have a couple of questions to Loini. Yours is the most, I think, fascinating topic tonight. I would like to ask you about these pink dresses, which are the most prevalent among the Ovambo traditional Ovambo dresses. I have been told or heard at some stage that the origin of this pink color would be from the missionaries, the Finnish missionaries, having dressing the people originally in white dresses, and because the people were wearing this kind of red ointment to cover their skin, that the dresses, the white fabric would then turn into pink, and then they started to dye the fabric into pink color. So I would like to ask if this is something that you've actually found to be true, or is it just something that somebody's been telling around as an urban legend? And then another question about these pink dresses and the fabrics. They actually, a lot of different patterns in the print. There's a lot of different combinations of different variations of pink colors and hues and stripes. And I have been told that these color and stripe combinations would actually carry some meanings of where you come from, or some kind of, is that true? Is it still true nowadays? Would that be some kind of continuation of these traditional beads and other kind of garments that were originally worn? Or is it something that doesn't carry any kind of meaning anymore? Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that question. The first one I did, when I was doing my undergrads, I did study about the Odelela fabric, the pink one that you are talking about. The pink, originally the Ovambo women were exploring whether it's an ochre kind of ointment that they were wiping on their bodies. And when they became a Christian, that was not allowed. But again, there was those women who did not convert. And what they used to use was the roots to color now their skirt. Because even though some people did not convert to Christianity, but there were traders around, so that is where some people also managed to adapt to the dress. So when they brought this cloth now, they would continue dyeing it, because for the leather part, they were also tanning it and adding the color. And from what I found out, it was, I'm not sure whether it was the German traders who saw that dyeing was a Wambo tradition, and so they decided to supply the synthetic dye. If you compare the dyes that were being used in 1980s, the color compared to what we have now, it's completely different. So I think with the trading, the color started changing. And if I'm not mistaken, the pink actually, it was brought in by the Chinese. Yes, because the original was ochre color, and the ochre reddish color, which is similar to what we use, and then the traders brought in maybe a reddish color. And people were just adapting whatever was available. So now it's not even only pink, you'll find some people dyeing even with purple. So people are just taking whatever it works. And they were accepting of the synthetic because it was a faster process. Okay, and then the second question. Oh yes, the stripes, about whether groups are using it to identify themselves. No, everyone is just mixing all the different stripes. I mean, this is an important topic because I tried asking my mother all the knowledge, and she is a teacher. She was like, yes, go and ask your grandmother. So you see, so there was that gap with the whole change of career life. There was that gap of sharing knowledge. So that is why I'm emphasizing on it's something that we need to write about. How there are a few groups who have tried to at least show their identity by maybe how they create the stripes on their skirts. For example, the Mbanja people, that's one of the group that has managed to maintain the culture. The way they add the stripes on their skirts is not the same way the other group. So there are a few distinctions, but again, if you talk to the average Namibian girl, we will not share with you about this history. Yes.
Wonderful, thank you. Heta, so you said you have a question from our stream.
Actually, there's now 2 questions. I noticed that it's now 6 o'clock, but maybe we can just go through them anyway. Okay, so first question is, could you say a bit more about the role the Finnish missionaries possibly played in stopping Awambo from getting involved in the events of the genocide of 1904 to 1908? This is not a specific question on anyone, so feel free to answer. And then the next one is for Dr. Shiweda. How would you decolonize the Namibian teacher training curriculum?
Wow, big questions.
Thank you for the question. I feel that it's something that I have actually talked about recently with regard to how we train our teachers. We kind of teach our teachers to, especially with regard to English, the English subject, that we tend to forget that we as Africans are oral. You know, we rely on oral information being passed on, you know, that, but now we have opted to teach them in other ways that are foreign to them, like maybe asking them to write journals or to write, you know, diaries. That is not something that, you know, African people do, you know, because then they relied on information being passed on via folk tales and stuff like that. I'm thinking that perhaps if you could perhaps think of the way that Africans learned in the past, perhaps then we could, you know, make learning for them easy or easier. That's one way that I can think of decolonizing the curriculum. Thank you.
Anyone about the genocide question?
Maybe you can. I think the specialists were sitting in the audience, and at least some of them already left the building. But
yeah, if there's any specialist here who wants to answer, the floor is yours.
I can add to the question, but I'm not a specialist and I don't have the answer to that genocide question. But in general, it's interesting to see that question in the context of Finnish-German relations in history, and how in Finland, in other occasions, there's been a tendency to emphasize distance from what Germans have done. So there was a moment in the 1940s where Finland, together with Germany, was fighting against Soviet Union, and for a long time historiography said, no, it's a separate war. We really didn't have anything to do with the Germans. There are symbolic elements like Finland having swastika in some military elements, but it has nothing to do with the German swastika. So emphasizing the distance. So the question, and I don't have the answer, is like, okay, there was a situation where there were Germans and Finns who, to some extent, went there together, or Finns went there also influenced by the fact that Germans went to Southwest Africa, right? So, and the Germans are doing a genocide, and so the Finnish, you know, there was no connection at all, or was there, and what this Finnish-German context and articulation was at the time when everybody recognized these Germans were committing a genocide there, and Finns were totally clean, innocent of any connection with that kind of stuff. Right. So we've heard the story of Finns having nothing to do with Germans when Germans do things that are afterwards considered nasty. Maybe this time it's true. I don't know. I'm not a specialist there, but I think it's a fascinating question. So if anybody wants to take up. Yes, please.
Neither am I a specialist or historian, and unfortunately Dr. Eirola has just left because he has written a very interesting dissertation book titled The Ovambo Gefahr, about the actions and the work of the Finnish missionaries in Ovambo land. And the conclusion there, as I have now it's been a long time since I read the book, was that the Finns actually, Dr. Rautanen and the others, acted as go-betweens between the Ambo and the German colonial administration, keeping good order and working order in the Ovambo area, and trying and succeeding in keeping the German administration away from that area. So finally, whatever happened down there in the south with Herero and other, didn't happen this Ovambo land was totally aside of all those developments. And actually, by the end of the German colonial era, the German administration was never extended to Ovambo land. I stand to be corrected if something is wrong here, but that's how I remember that. Thank you.
Wonderful, yes, thank you. Yes, I'm not a specialist there. My point wasn't to claim that the Germans would have been doing stuff there where the Finns were, but rather interested in figuring out what the attitude of the Finns, to the extent they had idea that Germans are committing a genocide near here. Did they say something about, did they feel uncomfortable, comfortable, and that kind of questions were my questions. I've been wondering here, but I guess we will not find conclusive answers to that question. Or will we? Maybe not tonight. So I guess it's time to wrap up. As Hetta said, we already a little bit past our time, so we thank everyone. Let me start by thanking Armando and Rosebud. Thank you for organizing the technique here. And I thank our speakers and Meameno, Loini, Leila, and thank you, Hetta, His Excellency, and everybody who participated asking good questions and making excellent comments. Please come back we will be doing many kinds of events as the Colonialism Group of Historians Without Borders. Thank you.
Thank you, Teivo.